Hello, friends. Another episode of the Mist podcast where I just talk about shit. Mainly in the areas of your spiritual, emotional, and energetic premises. Or whatever the fuck I want to talk about. Anyway, so I was consulting with my wife. We were kind of going over some topics, and I think there's a couple important things to touch on, just because I have thoughts. And one of them is going to be like the consistency of the motion of things in the universe. Because this consistent motion is almost something that has its own sense of awareness. And unless you are going to be inside of certain aspects of its motion, it's going to take you anyway. So, meaning that like everything's cause and effect. So, some of the smallest and most unintentional things can lead to the most intentful manifestations without even having an accumulative realization. And so, I think we need to stop thinking in terms of that we aren't communicating to more than just ourselves, inside of ourselves, right? You have all these cells inside of your body that whenever you're speaking and you're talking and you're communicating, themselves are going to be offering some form of guidance based on you being the energetic guidance to your entire body, to your entire entity self. This includes your biofield and everything else, but it's like you're still the constant command right now to where all of that is, what's happening to it, and what it does. And this kind of goes in a little bit to what I was talking about on the last episode with understanding yourself, because understanding yourself is what now brings things into your control, and that's also what gives you awareness. And when things have awareness and you have understandings in those awarenesses, then now you're talking more on the line of, as you could say, having more of your will to be free back in your hands. And there's always going to be a consistent motion of things inside of the universe that will go and that will happen, and there's still always going to be things out of your free will, essentially. But there's still some aspect of like what's in your hands, as you could say, with trusting the universe per se, is that there's that understanding comes from knowing that there's a certain amount of things that are in your hands and a certain amount of things that are out of your control. And every affiliation that you have from point to point is your vibrational position on those things. So to be able to consistently have a concrete place on what you want to be condemning inside of yourself means that you also have to be making sure that you dignify every piece of energy that you accumulate inside of your own head as an interest, as a start. And look at all the points in your past existence where your manifestations could be liable to your current future, to your current or your future. Because if you still have any part of yourself that is basing tomorrow out of yesterday, you're still living any amount of the same days you do twice. And you're rummaging over multiple experiences, and it can seem like that you're having this relapse of a continuum that is not favorable to you. Well, it's remembering that your world, like internal, and everything external is a reflection of that internal world. So because there's so many compartments to the pieces that make you as a whole, and some things that are sometimes spiritually incomprehensible, and take a little bit of a line of understanding of sitting with yourself to even start gathering them. And even then, depending on how deep you go, will depend on how far you actually get. But when you're trying to walk the line of now bringing things back into your hands, you have to remember every part of you that could be commanding something else inside of your existence. And this could be overall ideals. This could be something that you just said out loud one time, but you felt so much emotion behind it, because remember, your thoughts are language of the mind, emotions are language of the body, and when all of these are in a complete motion, you have the purest form of manifestation, which is a guided intention elevated by an emotion, regardless of if it's a higher vibrational one or not. And then just dumbing everything down back into back into energy. It's almost like if you could metaphorically take everything in existence, in your existence, in your previous existence, and your understanding of your own existence, and put it down as if it all works like magnetism. If it all literally just works like positive and negative, and if you untie the emotional bias, remember there's like a wall that kind of goes into what starts to, you could say, manipulate you, because that's the second we come out of the womb, we are already on the path of manipulation and the stripping of our energy as much as possible, or the fabrication of it in whatever possible way. That's just the design of almost everything around us has been, it's designed as, quote, put that term, designed, since we came out of the womb, and things have had a fluid motion on us. And the interesting thing about us being organisms is that, like, other than universal laws, you need to just understand your biology. That's part of understanding, like, yourself, is like how you actually function. And because information is also an unconscious guidance to manifestation. Because if you only base a premise off of the current information you have, and you dignify that is fact, true, or anything else, then you're dignifying your reality by a specific parameter. And the only way that you're going to be able to fully manifest anything back into your hands is deleting those parameters, as if you're deleting a function in a computer. You have to start having a different type of outlook, because you are an organism that is adaptable. You have adaptability, and over time, humans themselves have consistently, as other animals do, adapted to whatever is going on. But it's ironic. I think that's the things that we've had to adapt to have also been prone into manipulation. So that's kind of where you start to see, like, well, this did this to me over time, and I didn't realize it, and now I've manifested this, and then that became my complete realistic reality. But I didn't ever realize until a certain point that it was petrified out of pure delusion. And so you could say this is like asking yourself the difference between the actual pure form of truth and what's delusional to yourself. And there's only so many things that can give you evidence, because I think every person walking this planet has seen their own unconscious, you've seen your own manifestations. You've talked about it, you spoke about it, you thought about it, you whatever, and then it just happened, or you saw it, or, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you also try to do the same thing for something else, and you're like, why did that happen? And it's like, there's, the first question is always the beginning of opening a door, but that room could have more doors in it that offers a different level of insight, and you have to keep walking deeper. And if you only intend on staying on the surface level, then you will be in the constant realm of unconscious manifestation. You will only live in the fluid motion of what happens to you, not what you make happen. And that's kind of a part of, like, the delusion versus the truth anyway. Or you could say even progressing and making a skill, right? If you only do it in a prism of thought, then all you're going to do inside of the thought is, like, think about it and practice it in your head almost to what you think is correct and how you would do it. But once you pick up an actual guitar, if you thought through it long enough and deep enough, then you might and maybe have a couple things in your favor. But you're still going to start from square one like most people, which is getting your muscle memory there. And technically the brain training for that can also happen inside of your head. But once again, the skin in the game, your involvement, is the most important part of it all. And there's starting to become a melting of mind and everything else. Like, although these things seem to be very distinct between each other, I think many people are starting to now awaken to the fluid motion of how everything is connected, and how when you start solving problems in one place, they get solved in another. Maybe that doesn't speak for everything, but and maybe this is only a reference to what I've noticed, because only I'm going to notice what is relative to some of the constant parts of my subconscious. And the reason why we talk about the connotation of everything in reality and existence as a connotation that's based purely out of something that seems almost always metaphorical and always only consistent with what is bound to the perceiver, is because everything that you can experience is nothing but a creative, playful playground of what you can now do something with or something without. Because if you want to be somebody different, then line it out. Who do you want to be? What traits does this person have? What do they do every day of their lives? What do they practice? What are they involved in? And me, myself, being here right now is an entire procurement of that exact ideology, because I had to do all of those things. Now, I didn't get as specific as I could have, but I had to start putting certain pieces together to be like, if I want to fix the mind, then I got to fix the body. And I say fix as in, if I want to heal the mind, then I want to understand how to get out of my suffering into a higher vibrational sense of self. Then I have to understand how my body is affiliated now to intaking things, because my body is the number one. I'd say number one. It is a hand-in-hand coherency to the brain. But to shift the brain and most of the things going on at a long-form standpoint, you have to implement the body's changes, because most things have a concrete wall of fluid motion. It's just like, once again, going from delusion and then going into logic and then going into truth. And all of these have a really harsh metalled ground in the middle, because once you start hitting this point where you're trying to go from delusion to logic, well, your logic can be just as limited as the construment of your delusions, because you're only at the premise of believing a certain level of truth, and your truth is also an inhabitant and inhibitor to how much you do or do not know. And I think this is kind of why we're at this big fat revolution overall of what's about to happen technologically with AI and everything else, because, like, what do you do? What do you do when you have more proof than you could ever have in front of your face to say, hey, I'm powerful? And you're powerful because now if you wanted to go do something, you can pull up an AI and it's going to expand the process. Like, something 3 years can take you 3 months. Used to take you however long to do something, and now you can do it in fractions of a time and manage multiple things and do whatever else, and you never have any other thing that you have to hardly fucking think about on top of that, other than like the direct execution of the things that you're trying to achieve. And once again, if you want to get your unconscious manifestations to be conscious, then you have to make conscious manners and do conscious moves and be conscious of yourself. And this is an overall reflection. Remember, everything is a fractal. You're nothing but a fractal, and everything inside of you is just a complete refraction of everything else inside of it. You and all of your organs work just like a cell does, a single cell. So if you're made of all of those cells, then how are we going to treat the entirety of the presence of the body itself any differently? And this is why having concrete things to meddle over, to have how you want to basically start formatting and shifting yourself is something that's going to take time. And the only reason time, quote, time is a factor, I could say, is that your cells have a repurposing to them, and they also have an energy hold with them. And the only way that you're going to be able to fully do everything that you need to within the self to get to where you're trying to go is going to be letting the purposefulness of all of those built up energy pockets in the body completely flush themselves out. And that can come with, the time certain organs replace themselves faster than others, but the healing of certain aspects of those energy pockets doesn't always take an entire, for instance, your liver, your colon, have an entirely different set of when your colon's cleansing, because your colon cleanses itself every 48 hours, roughly, depending on how clean your system is, because that's not really an organ. It's more like a processor. I don't know the full extent of biology, don't get me wrong. I'm just metaphoricizing enough to what I've understood from very good teachers who are giving a much better, more accurate confrontational science of this. Shout out to Yaki TV for this specifically. He would know. But if you have like your liver, which is going to take X amount of time for all the cells inside of it to be repurposed, then you can still cleanse it through. But if there's any pent up energetic ties between that specific thing being held in reference to the rest of the body, then that's when you start incurring, as you could say, a problem. But that's also when you start incurring a fluid consistent, like that's how people get stuck in certain ways of their mentality, because your body is still a coherent measure of that exact same thing. So if you're not releasing energy in certain compartments of the body, and then you're not going to see the fluid motion of the progression of your mind in the place that you're trying to go as well, is a part of my point. So, people do podcasts and stuff for hours sometimes just talking about it, and I feel like I could go on and on and on and on and on, but I also don't like to waste people's time. I like to get straight to the point, and if we're going to talk about something, unless there really is like a long proclaimed topic about like place to place to place to place, it's probably just more realistic that I just just saying it out loud, because I'm just like going over this right now in my own head of like, I have a topic and I could probably sit here and talk for a long time, but if I get away from the point, then it's not going to give you what you need. So, and that's what I'm here to help you guys get an understanding that maybe somebody else just isn't giving, or whatever it might be. This is, I hope they don't build an AI out of me, out of my information on here as well. Whoever does that in the future, fuck you. But yeah, that will do it for this episode, talking about manifestation and unconscious manifestation.